14, they said, were stopped before the law came for the man who stood between. The fires went out in 1958. I lit the last one. I am 87 years old. I have spent the last 66 winters not lighting a fire. Origin Protocol. Witness File 011, Witness Designation, Witness, D-011-A. I am Thomas Gray. I was born in 1937, in the boreal zone of northwestern Ontario. This recording was made in November 2024, at a wooden cabin near Sioux Lookout. My grandfather brought me into the work when I was 13. I was the youngest in my family who could walk a long distance through deep snow. I did not know what the work was when I began. By the time I knew, it was already mine. The keepers had a title. The title translates, approximately, as the ones who stand between. There were never many of us. After 1907, there were even fewer. After 1958, there was one. The entities your records have begun to call Wendigo were the reason we existed. We did not use that name. We did not need to. We knew them by the cold they brought, by the tracks they left, and by what was missing from the houses we passed in spring. I am speaking now because the title no one wanted has become a title no one remembers. I am speaking because I lit the last fire. And someone should know why I did not light another, because the last fire did not fail. I did. My grandfather woke me before dawn on the first day of November, 1950. I was 13. He told me to dress warmly and to bring nothing. He said the work did not need anything I owned. We walked for 6 hours into the bush. I learned later that we walked a route my grandfather's grandfather had walked. The route did not appear on any map. It was learned by walking it, with someone who had walked it before. We came to a clearing at midday. There was a circle of stones the size of a small house. The stones were old. Older than any building I had ever seen. My grandfather knelt and lit a small fire at the center. The fire was not for warmth. The fire was a marker. He told me 3 things on the walk back. The first was that the fires were never to be lit at the same time. The second was that the fires were never to be in a straight line. The third was that the fires were to be moved each season, but only inside a pattern that no single person could ever see. The pattern was held by all of us together. My grandfather said a straight line invites it. A circle tires it. A broken circle releases it. That was why no keeper was allowed to know the whole pattern. He said, a creature follows the warmth of bodies. A creature follows the smell of fires. We do not destroy the creature. We move it. We keep it walking in a circle that goes nowhere, away from the people. Now I know what he was teaching me. Then I just walked behind him. I did not know he was teaching me how to survive a thing he believed would one day use my own hunger against me. My grandfather had been a young man in 1907. He was 21 when the police came up the river. The keepers had a way of recognizing each other across the boreal zone, by marks left on certain trees at certain river bends, and by the smoke patterns of the corridor fires at dawn. My grandfather had visited the Great Keeper at his camp 2 summers before that. He said the Great Keeper was an old man, then. He said the Great Keeper had stopped 14 of them in his lifetime. The 14th had been his own brother. After that, my grandfather said, the Great Keeper went silent for an entire winter. He still walked the corridor. He still lit the fires. But he did not speak. In the 7th month of 1907, the police came up the river to arrest the Great Keeper. They came because a man and a woman from a different community had given a sworn statement. They said the keepers were murderers. They said the Great Keeper had killed people who were not yet Wendigo, who could have been saved. The court did not understand the difference between killing a Wendigo and killing a person who was about to become one. There is no difference, in the court's language. There is every difference, in ours. The Great Keeper was placed in custody. 3 days before his trial, he was found dead near a spruce tree. My grandfather never spoke of the details. His remaining brother was arrested too. He died in prison the following year. My grandfather said, that was the year the old law died. He said, after that year, only the small fires remained. He told me this when I was 15. He said it once. He never told me again. But after that, every fire he lit looked smaller. In the years between 1950 and 1958, I walked the corridor with my grandfather, then with my uncle, then with my older cousin. The pattern took 6 people to maintain. 6 fires, lit at different times, in different places, on different nights. None of us could see the whole pattern. That was the point. The hunger was old. Older than us. Older than our memory of the people who had built the corridor in the first place. The hunger was clever. It would learn a pattern, if a pattern were visible. So we kept the pattern hidden, even from ourselves. There were 3 winters during that time when the corridor faltered. In 1953, my uncle was caught at a logging camp during a storm and could not return for 9 days. In 1955, 2 of our fires went unlit because my older cousin's wife was dying and he had to be at her side. In 1957, the worst winter, the corridor failed in a section we did not control. A trapper went missing near a creek bend my grandfather knew well. They never found him. They found his snowshoes, in a clearing, neatly placed side by side, as if someone had taken them off and continued into the snow without them. There were no signs of struggle. Only the snowshoes, placed neatly, and a line of prints that became lighter as they went. My grandfather did not say anything when we heard. He looked at me. He said, "It is hungry, now. It will be hungry for a long time." He said it the way a person tells you the river has frozen over and the spring is far away. My grandfather died that summer. The corridor was 4 people, now. Then 3. And a pattern built for 6 does not break slowly. It tears. On the night of February 9, 1958, I lit a fire at a marker stone we called the crossing. The crossing was the western anchor of the corridor. It had been a fire site for as long as anyone in our family had walked the boreal. My cousin had lit a fire at the eastern anchor 4 hours earlier. The pattern, that night, was 3 fires. Mine was the last one. Before I struck the match, I sat by the marker stone for a long time. I had been hungry for 2 weeks. The winter had been long, and our supplies had run lower than they should have. I had been thinking about a man I had passed on the road 3 days earlier. He had asked me for food. I had given him a piece of bread. Then I had walked on. I had been thinking about that piece of bread for 3 days. I had been thinking about taking it back. I knew what that thinking was. I had been raised in the work. I knew the early signs. I knew the signs the way a fisherman knows the smell of bad water. I lit the fire. The fire burned. I sat by the fire for a long time. Then I walked away. The next night, my cousin came to the western marker to check on me. He found the marker stone. He found the spent fire. He did not find me, because I had walked another 20 miles east to the next nearest community and I had stayed in the church basement of that community for 14 days. I did not stop because the world no longer needed the fire. I stopped because I was no longer certain I could stand beside it. I have not lit another. My cousin walked the corridor alone for 2 more winters. In 1960, he sent me a letter. He said the work was no longer possible with one person. He said I should know that, because it had been my fire that ended it. I did not answer the letter. He sent another letter the following spring. He said he had moved south. He had taken work in a paper mill. He had a wife and 2 daughters. He said he was sorry. He said he understood. I did not answer that letter either. Through the 1960s and into the 1970s, I heard from people occasionally. A woman who had been a corridor walker in a region 200 miles to the north sent word that she had left the work. The 2 old men who had carried the southern arms sent no word at all, but their fires stopped appearing on the smoke patterns we used to see at dawn. By 1972, as far as I knew, the corridor existed only in my memory, and in the memories of perhaps 4 other people. By 1980, perhaps 2. The hunger did not go away because we stopped tending the fires. The hunger only became invisible to us. The communities in the boreal zone began to report a different kind of disappearance. People who had walked into the bush and never come out. Cases filed under exposure. Cases filed under misadventure. The numbers were small enough that no one outside the region noticed. The numbers were large enough that everyone inside the region knew. In 7 of those cases, the search dogs refused the tree line. In 3, the compasses spun. In 1, the search party found a warm circle in the snow with no fire at its center. But no one wanted the old work back badly enough to ask what it would cost. In 1998, my grandson came to visit. He was 23. He had finished a university degree in environmental studies. He wanted to talk to me about the boreal. He asked the right questions. He knew the names of the trees. He knew the names of the rivers. He did not know the work. I had decided, on the 2nd day of his visit, to begin telling him. I had been waiting since 1980 for this visit. On the 3rd day, I walked him through the structure of the corridor. I told him what each of the 6 fires had been for. I told him the names of the 6 markers. I told him the names of the people who had walked the corridor with me before 1958. On the 4th day, I told him about the crossing. I told him what I had thought, sitting by the marker stone in February of that year. I told him about the piece of bread. I told him what I had recognized in myself. I watched my grandson's face while I told him. He did not look at me with horror. He did not look at me with disbelief. He looked at me the way a young man looks at an elderly relative who is telling him something the young man already wants not to inherit. The work requires you to walk into something cold for 50 years and trust that you will come out the same person who walked in. I did not. He understood that. He understood that I was not asking him to inherit a corridor. I was asking him to inherit the question of whether he too could stand beside the fire. He left 2 days later. He never came back to that cabin. I wanted him to stay. I wanted him to be braver than I had been. Then I realized that was not love. That was inheritance wearing a kinder face. So when he left, I did not call him back. I did not blame him. I have never blamed him. I only blamed myself for almost asking. It is November now. The recording is being made by a woman who drove out from Thunder Bay. She has been patient. I have known her for 2 years. I trust her with this. I want to explain one thing before this ends. After my grandson left, I began a different kind of work. I have a wall, in this cabin, of paper maps. The maps cover 60 years of disappearances in the boreal zone, from 1958 to 2024. Cases filed under exposure. Cases filed under misadventure. Cases never filed at all, because the missing person had no one to report them. I have marked each one. I have grouped them. The patterns are visible, if you know what to look for. There are 43 of them. 43 active, in the boreal zone, between northern Ontario and Manitoba. I have been tracking them for 66 years, the whole time without lighting a fire. The map is the only thing I have to give. My grandson did not want the work. I understand why. I want to say this clearly, on this recording, for whoever listens to it. I did not fail to pass it on. I refuse to pass it on. The work is no longer safe to inherit. The work is no longer safe because the man who would have taught it to him is the man who lit the last fire because he could no longer trust himself beside it. A keeper protects what is outside himself. A keeper does not pass on what has begun growing inside himself. I have one map. The map is in this cabin. It is yours, if you find it. 43 names. Still moving. The fires have not been lit. File status, open. Containment method, extinct. Remaining asset, 1 map. Keeper status, compromised, deceased, non-transferable. The boreal zone did not freeze over. That is not the same as safe.